Welcome to the 26th session on operating system and Linux. I'm Manibhushan D'Souza, and in today's topic we are going to discuss about swapping. We will see what is swapping, and we will also look at continuous memory allocations. So let's start with the swapping. We know that if a process has to be executed, then it has to be there in the memory. So if your code is not there in the memory, it cannot be executed. However, there are times when the process does not get executed. For example, the process may be there in the memory, but it may be there in the ready queue. So it is occupying some memory, but it is there in the ready queue, not performing any action. Similarly, if the process is waiting for an input output operation, then it is not doing any useful thing, but it is still waiting for an input output operation. So that means to say that the process need not be always be there in the memory. So can we think of taking this process from the memory and then writing it onto the secondary storage device? So only when the process is executing, you keep the process in the memory, and when it is not executing, when it is not performing a useful thing, it can be taken out and put into a secondary storage device. When I say it can be taken out, what do I mean to say? That the state of that particular process can be taken from the primary memory and can be put it into the secondary memory. Maybe later at times when the things work fine, it can be again brought back to the primary memory and then executed. So in other words, suppose if you have a memory and let's say you have a CPU here, and the process which are waiting in the ready queue or maybe the process which are there elsewhere can be swapped out of the memory. So I'm using the word swapped out. Swapped out means you are writing the state of this particular process into the backing storage device. Okay, and whenever it is required, whenever needed, you then bring it back to its original state. So you have swapping it out of the memory and then swapping it in into the memory whenever it is required, and then you can continue executing. So this is the idea of swapping. So swapping is nothing but taking the process from the memory and transferring it into a backing storage device. In particular, the in our case it will be the hard disk. Okay, so this is how the process will work. Let me give you a simple example. Let's look at the round robin scheduling. Now hope you are all familiar with that round robin scheduling. So in the round robin scheduling, what happens is every process is given a quanta of time within which it has to be executed. Now suppose this is the one that is getting executed now, and then if it completes its work, suppose you have given this particular process, so you have a process here and this process was executing and it has completed. Now what it has to do is it has to wait until next round. Okay, so it is simply waiting. Instead of this, what you can do, you can take it. Okay, you can ask the dispatcher to transfer that thing into the secondary storage device, that is the backing storage device, and when its turn comes, you can quickly get it back to the, not from here, you can quickly get it back to its position. So this is how you can do it. So what is being done is the process can be swapped out of the memory, can be temporarily written onto the disk, and when required it can be brought in. Now why do you have to swap out a process? That's the next question that will come. So why, you may ask the question, why do you want to remove a process from the memory and put it into the backing storage device. We are doing that so that we can free the memory. You know very well the primary memory is the smallest and you don't have too large primary memory. So what you can do is we can efficiently use the memory. So we cannot increase the memory. What you can do, if the process is not doing any useful thing, it can be swapped out. And once it is swapped out, you can take some other process and swap it in and then start it executing. So what we are doing, we are taking one process, swapping it out of the memory into the backing storage, and we are swapping in other process and placing it into this location. So one side we are swapping out, the other side we can swap it in. Okay. I've given you an example of round robin scheduling. The concept can be extended even for the priority based process. So in the priority based process, what happens? Some processes are given higher priority and they have to be executed. Now in such case, what it can be done is whenever a higher priority process enters the system, the lower priority process can be swapped out of the memory to make it way, and then once the higher priority process completes, the low priority process can be swapped into the memory and then continue. So what happens in this case is you have the memory here and you have your disk here. So whenever a high priority process arrives into the system, one of the low priority process can be taken out and written into the disk, and this high priority process can be placed in that its location and then continued. Once the higher priority process completes it, the lower priority processes can be brought back into the memory. So this is called as rollout and rolling. So when the higher priority process enters, the lower priority processes are rolled out of the memory, and at later stage they are rolled into the memory. Okay. Next question that arises into our mind is, okay, so we have the memory here, okay, and there are processes are there, many processes are there. Okay, let's assume that we have many processors. Okay, and we also have the backing storage device. Now suppose if I swap out a process into the disk at this time and I schedule some other process is executing instead of that. Okay, now after some time, can I bring this swapped out process back to some other location? So I have taken the process from this location, from the physical memory, and I placed it into the backing storage device. But when I am swapping in, this is swapping out. So when you are swapping out, you take the process from one location. Let's say you have the process P1, you swap out from one location, but when you are swapping in, that location, that physical location may not be available. So can you put it in some other location? So that is the next one. So is it possible to the swapped out process to be swapped back to a different place which it was not using previously? It is possible provided the memory mapping supports that. Okay, so I told you what is memory mapping. So the memory is bound at two places. One is at generally, if you at compile time itself you bind it, nothing can be done. So suppose if the memory is bound at the load or assembly level, then you cannot change it, because you know very well when if you are doing it in the program, when the program gets compiled or when the program gets assembled, if the actual physical memory is there directly embedded into the code, then it has to be loaded in the same location. So if your program says the program has to be loaded here itself, this is the fixed memory in which it has to be loaded. It cannot be loaded elsewhere if that question, if the addressing is such that it is a fixed addressing scheme. In that case, you cannot swap in the processor into some different location. However, if the mapping or if the binding of the address is done at the execution time, so when the program executes, the physical memory location is actually checked. Whereas in the previous case, what happens is when the program executes, the physical address is direct. You go and fetch it from this location only. You are directly saying. But in terms of the dynamic binding, what is being done is at execution time, you have a base register, you add the offset and then generate the addresses. So in that case, what happens is you can place the swapped out process at a different location, even though you have swapped out the process from this location, from this place. You can swap in at a different location because address calculation is done dynamically. So if the address is computed dynamically, then you can swap out from one location and swap in at a different location. Next thing that we need to understand is what is this backing storage. So I told you that the process is written into the backing store. Commonly it is a disk, and particular hard disk. In today's world it is the hard disk, which can provide a direct access to the content which are there. So you generally write the image, you know very well, when you have the process, there is a process control block PCB associated with every process, which contains the details about the process. You write that image directly along with the memory image, entire image you write it back to the disk. Okay, and because hard disk can provide direct access at any time, you can readily recover it back from the hard disk and place it back into the memory. Now, why did I mention hard disk? Is you cannot think of storing it in a tape drive. You know what is a tape drive? Tape is a continuous drive, so you will have to rewind it and then get it back. It's a serial access device, so we generally don't write on a serial access device, but we write it on a direct access device, and that is the hard disk in today's world. Okay. When we look at the swapping, the CPU scheduler will decide which process need to be executed. Okay, so the CPU, when the CPU says I want this scheduler, when the not the CPU, when the scheduler says okay, this is the program I'm going to schedule next. So you know there are different types of schedulers are there. So the short-term scheduler is responsible for dispatching the processes to the CPU. So if the short-term scheduler says that okay, this is the one that I'm going to execute now, then what it's going to say is it will call a dispatcher and it will ask the dispatcher, go get this process. This process is there, it is been swapped out. You check whether that process is swapped out. If it is swapped out, swap in and then start executing. So what the dispatcher will do is it will come and check the memory to see whether the process is already swapped out. If the process is swapped out, it will check the memory. So if suppose the dispatcher checks the memory and finds that okay, the whichever program that was told by the scheduler, it is not there in the memory but it is swapped out, then it will check the existing processes in the memory. If the memory is full with all the processes, it will select one of them and it will first swap out one of the process so as to make vacate that place or make a place for the other process and then swap in the required process, and it allows once the process is there in the memory, you know very well, you can directly execute it. Now because of this problem, if it is swapping out, remember the hard disk, even though it is fast and furious and other things, but it cannot compete with the speed of the CPU. So hard disk reading from the direct access device is an input output operation, and the input output operations are slower. So when one process wants to, when the scheduler, whenever a scheduler says, okay, currently this program is getting executed here, and I want to switch to the next program. So I want the second program to get executed. That's what the scheduler will do. When the scheduler does that, what will happen? There is a context switch from program one, from the process one process to the other process. So if there are two processes P and K, when the process P has to be halted and the process K has to be given to the CPU. Now this is called as context switching. If this particular process is already swapped out, then that swapping out timing, swapping in timing will also add to the context switching. So generally context switching is going to take more time because of the transfer, and the transfer depends on what is the length of the program. If the length of the program is longer, then proportionately the context switching will take more time. There are other, even though I have told you that okay, swapping is simple, you take one process right onto the disk, and later when you get it back, read it back into the memory. So that is well and good, but there are some problems that are associated with it. One of the main problem is when you try to swap out a process. If you have a process over here, when you try to swap out a particular process onto the backing storage, you must ensure that the program is idle. It's not doing any processing. So don't try to pull out a process which is already executing, then it will create too much of a problem or too much of a confusion. Now generally definitely nobody will do that, because that is ruled out thing. But what happens is the process may be executing inside the CPU. So you might have given the process to the CPU. So it may be working in the CPU, but what happens is it may request for an input output operation, and it may be in the waiting state. Now what happens is in the waiting state, if the process is performing input output operation, it will be definitely in the waiting state. In the waiting state, the process is not doing any useful thing. So can you think of swapping out that process? So the process is waiting for an input or an output operation, and it is not doing anything. But can I think of swapping that process out? The answer is it is not a great idea, because what will happen with the pending input output operation? For example, it was printing into the printer and you swapped it to the disk. What will happen now? Will it be able to continue its printing? So that's the question. It was accepting the input from the user. Enter your name, it has accepted. Enter your age. It before you could type it, the process is swapped out into the disk. What will happen in that case? So if the process is not completely idle, it is waiting for the input operation, then it is not a great idea to swap it out of the memory. However, you can think of doing a workaround with this. Okay. The simple example that I have already shown you is suppose what if you swap out, what is going to happen. Now let me give you a simplest example. Now suppose I have a process P1 here. Okay, let's say P1 here, and it is waiting for an input. It was waiting for an input from the input output device, and what you thought is okay, it's not doing any work, it is not doing any useful work, let me swap it out. So you swap out the P1, and then you take some other process and then swap in at that location. So you thought, okay, P2 is simply waiting, doing some input output operation. Let me take it and put some other process there. Now what will happen? This input output device didn't know that you have swapped out. So it will start getting the data, and it will simply come and start writing onto the P2's work area, because it didn't know that you have taken the P1 out from the memory and you have put P2 instead of that. It is not, it got the data, it simply comes and dumps it there. So what happens? The end result may be disastrous. Okay, now there are many solutions are there for this one. One is the simplest solution is never allow the process to be swapped out whenever it is waiting for an input output operation. The next one is if it is accepting some input, that is it is getting some input, then don't write into the, so if you have the process here P1, let's say, and P1 is accepting some input here, so don't get the input directly onto this location. Instead, get the input to a temporary location, okay, somewhere temporary location. Ask the input output device to write the input that is required to a separate location, okay, that is called as system buffer. Okay, and then later transfer this one. Remember, once it is there in the secondary storage, you can easily transfer it, then transfer it to the actual process. So the input output device directly don't write onto the process, but it will transfer all the data to the buffer. From that buffer you are transferring it back to the process. Again, it is a costlier affair because you are putting something into the buffer, and then from the buffer you are again transferring. It will take more time, but that's a solution. So what's the advantage of this is, suppose when the input output is transferring the data into the buffer, if this particular process is swapped out with the P2, what the operating system will do is, it will not do the transfer of the content of the buffer into this area, because operating system knows that P1 is already swapped out, it is taken out of the memory. So once the input output operation is completed, it will keep it in the buffer, and when the P1 return back later, whenever the P1 return back, it's going to say that your buffer is full already, you got the data into the buffer, now take this from the buffer and then start executing it. So this way you can have system buffer to solve the problem. Now let's look at other problem that we encounter. The other problem is how do you place the processes into the memory. So generally what is the idea that we have is, we have a memory. So let's say we have a memory, and we divide that memory generally into two pieces. One piece is exclusively given to the OS, wherein the others are not allowed to interact, and the remaining portion of the memory is given to the user. So user can do anything. So operating system will reside at one place, and the user program will reside on the other part. So this is one possibility that you have, in which the operating system is there at the lower end of the memory. If you start from here 0, and if you say 100, and if you say 10,000, something like that, so it is there at the lower end of the memory. The other option is, operating system can be there at the higher end of the memory. Okay, so you can remember, not this, OS can be there at the higher end of the memory now, and definitely the user can be there at the lower end. So either the user can be there at the upper end or at the lower end. So if you take this 0, and if you take this as 900 and this as 10,000, so operating system can be either here, or it may be at the lower or at the higher. Generally operating system will occupy the lower level or the lower addresses. So beginning addresses, if you try to see the map, operating system will only occupy the beginning addresses. The reason for that is, generally, you know very well, whenever there is an interrupt in the system, an interrupt request is generated, and the interrupt request is being processed by a particular program, and this particular programs are generally placed at the lower end, not at the higher order of the memory. And also this interrupt vector. So if you press when you press a key, an interrupt actually occurs. When the printer goes out of paper, a interrupt occurs. So there will be list of interrupts that are available, and these interrupts are placed in a table called as interrupt vector, and generally these interrupt vectors are placed at the lower end of the memory. Okay, and also the device drivers, all those things, they usually fit in the lower end of the memory. So generally operating system stays at the lower end of the memory, and the user programs can stay at the higher end of the memory. Now if I look at the memory map now again, so I have the operating system. Let me read. All right, so I have this operating system, okay, occupying the lower end, and I can't do many things with that operating system. Now the remaining part is available for the users. So generally when we talk about that, we assign continuous memory for the user program. So for example, if it starts at 500, it may go continuously, it will go up to, let's say, just an example that I am giving, up to say 700. It is a continuous addresses 500, 501, 502, 503 and 700. So we give the address, we give the continuous allocation for the program. That is not always true, but you can do it, because later we will see that there are other possibilities that can also be used to increase the efficiency of the system. So this is nothing but a single continuous section that is being used in the memory. Now there are few things that the operating system must do whenever we have the division in the memory. So if you look at this operating system, we know that operating system occupies the lower end of the memory, and there will be process. You may have more than one process loaded in the multi-programming environment over here. So the two things the operating system has to do. What are those two things? One is it must not allow a user program to come and occupy or come and use the area that is allotted to the operating system. So this is a kind of protected place. The operating system must protect itself from a malicious process that may directly access its own memory and corrupt the operating system itself. Apart from that, operating system must also see to it that the process which are running don't cross their limit and then start using the content of the other program. So if you have a program P1 here and P2 here, so the programs must be protected so that a malicious program won't come and make modification to a already existing program. Okay, so the operating system has to do that. So that is called as a memory protection. How can I achieve the memory protection? So memory protection can be achieved using two registers. One is called as a relocation register, other one is the limit register. So what is relocation register? So relocation register contains the base address, the starting address or the smallest physical address of the process. So from where the process begins, that address it is contained in that. Limit is what is the maximum range that can be used by the process. So what is, in other words, what is the maximum address the process can generate. So can it generate 700? Can it generate 699? Can it generate 655? So what is the maximum range, the limit that it can generate? So whenever a CPU generates a logical address, remember when does a CPU generates a logical address? Whenever a process is executing. So CPU requires some data, some instruction, something. So when the process is executing, CPU will generate an address and tell that, okay, I want that data, I want this data, I want this code. So somewhere the address has to be generated, and we know that the address generated by the CPU is called as a logical address. So what is being done is, before the address is accessed from the physical memory, it goes to a protection system. The protection system first checks whether the address is within the logical limit. So is it within the logical limit? So for example, you are given a maximum address of 250. So your program, when it loads, you are saying that from 0 to 250 you are allowed to access that address. Beyond 250, your program is not supposed to make any request. Suppose if the request itself is 275, then the limit register will say that, say the limit was given to your program is 250. Who is deciding that? Operating system will decide it. So when the program loads, it says what will be the maximum limit. So the operating system now says that your limit was 250 and you are trying to make a request for 275, which is not allowed. So in that case, it is going to generate an error saying that this is a violation of the request. Suppose if the generated address is within the limit, then say for example the process makes a request for the address number 24, which is the limit that was given is 250. So the limit that was given is 250 and the process makes a request for 24. This is well within the range. So does this mean that you are going to go to the 24th physical address number 24 and read it? The answer is no, because your program may not be always be there at the 24. Remember, 24 is a very small number, and who is there at the lower level operating system will be there, so you cannot access that. So what you may have is you may have a relocation register which may contain, let's say if this contains the value 5000, relocation register contains a value 5000. So what is going to happen is your 24 is within the limit, so 24 will come here and it is added to 5000. So what is the final address? It is 5024. So your process, your program will go to the 5024th location and then start reading it. So that is what is called as a relocation. By changing the value, if this value was 500, you might have been accessing some other location. Okay, so that is why it is called as a relocation. Depending upon the value of it, whatever value it is there, you add the logical address to that and then get the actual physical location. So this is how the protection is done. Now the next one is if you have a memory and you have the CPU occupying this place, you have a CPU occupying this place and you have a process which is occupying on the other place. The process, you are occupying the other and you can have the process. Now you know very well, some process will be lengthier, some process will be shorter, some process may be taller, you may have different. Humans are also different, the programs will also be different. So you know very well, you have written a program for sorting the numbers. So you have also written a program for searching a value. You have also written a program to add two numbers or add two matrices. The length of the program differs. Okay, you know that. So the size of the memory location also will differ. One of the simplest allocation system is, it is very simple, is you take the memory. Now here onwards I will not draw the operating system, because it is assumed that operating system is there. Okay, it will be there and it will protect itself. I cannot touch the operating system because it won't allow me to do that. So one of the simplest way is to create a fixed partition. Okay, when the system starts, you generate a fixed partitions, either of the same size or of the variable size, but the partition is fixed. What is the meaning of saying partition is fixed is you cannot change the size of the partition. Okay, that's simple as that. It may be same, all the partitions may be of the same size, like 500 kb, 500 kb, 500 kb you generate it, or maybe one is 256, one is 512, 110, 24. It depends. You have a varied version, but the size is fixed. What is the meaning of that? You cannot change the size. So when you want to run more than one program, put one program here, second process here, third process here, and so on. So there is no problem here, because every process will occupy one fixed location. That is exactly within a fixed location, exactly one process will be there. But what is the problem with this is the degree of programming, multi-programming. What is the meaning of saying degree of multi-programming? At any given instance, how many multi-programs can be executed? Now in this case, that value is always fixed. So I have 6 partition here. So degree of multi-programming in my case is always 6, whether the system is fully loaded, half loaded, or normal. The limit is only 6, because partitions are already fixed. The number of partitions is fixed, their size is fixed. So this is not a great idea for us to use, for us to achieve. So what is being done is we go for some other options. Okay. So in the other option, what is being done is we start from like this. So initially we have this place, and this place I'm going to just mark it as we have CPU, not CPU, the OS, which I cannot touch. Okay. Now the remaining entire process is free. When any program comes, what you do is you place that program here. Okay. And when the other program comes, you place it here. The next program comes, you place it here. Next program comes, you place it here. Next program comes, the size may be varying. It is not fixed size, the sizes are varying now. If one of the program completes, this place becomes vacant. Remember that process has completed. Load some other program into this location. So wherever one process completes it, suppose if this process completes, load some other program into this location. It's as simple as that, is it not? It's a simple option. So what is the advantage here? Advantage is the degree of multi-programming varies. If all the programs are very, very short, you can have many programs executing. If all the programs are very, very large, then the number of multi-programming may be decreased, because you cannot fit all the programs. Remember, the size is the limit finally. If you have 1 GB of RAM, you cannot put 5 GB of processor into that. So if all the programs are very short, you can have large number of processors. If they are large, then you will have to reduce the number of degree of multi-programming. Okay. Now the operating system maintains a table indicating how many processes are there and what is the available free size, so that whenever a new process comes, it will first check whether there is enough space, and if so, it will occupy, it will be loaded into the memory. Now few things you must understand. One is the word called as a whole. So we generally use the word whole. What is the meaning of saying whole? See, when you have this one, when a process comes, remember operating system is already there, I don't bother about it. If this initially there is operating system here, I won't write that. Entire space is free. Okay, full is free because no programs are there. Initially nothing is loaded. When you start the system, nothing will be loaded. So this whole free place is called as a whole. Okay, so this is called as a whole. When you load one process, what will happen? The size of the whole decreases. It is already occupied. If you load two programs, what will happen? The size of the whole will again decrease. It was only one program is. If you put one more, the size of the whole will still decrease. If one of the process completes, size of the process, the whole will increase. So the at any given instance of time, the whole size, whole means vacant place, so don't get confused. A simple word here. When I say whole, it means it's a empty place where I can put a process there. Okay, so whenever a new process comes, what we are supposed to do is we have to search for a hole or a free place and then try to fit that process into that. And whenever a process completes, what we are supposed to do is we remove that process out and generate the hole so that others can be fitted into there, or maybe you can fit the same process at later time. So it is up to you. Let's look at a example over there. So for example, you have initially the OS is there at one corner and we have some processes over here. Suppose when the process 8 completes, what happens? You have a big hole in between. You can load a process here. The remaining you will have again slightly larger hole. You can load other process again. Again you will have a hole there. Maybe something else can be loaded. So hole is nothing but a block of available memory in which you can place them. Now what happens is at some other time the process 5 may also exit. In that case, what will happen? You will have a hole here also. Remember, it is not that always a process 8. Okay, and you have the hole here. What if the process 2 completes? Then you have a hole here and this will be the full hole that is available, very lengthy. See, if the adjacent processes completes, or if the process closer to the hole completes, then you merge the holes so that you get one bigger chunk in which a larger program can be fitted in. Okay, otherwise what will happen is initially you have very large hole, then it will become smaller and then you will not get anything. So if the two holes are adjacent, you merge them together. So that's simple as, and generate a bigger one. But I cannot think of directly merging this with here because they are not adjacent. Remember, only the adjacent one can be merged, not the one which is there at a further corner. Okay, so when we look at the system, there can be set of holes of various size, because you know program sizes are different, which are scattered throughout the memory. Okay, if when you try to enter a process, when a new process arrives, so if you have a very large hole and a process arrives, what you are supposed to do is give it some place, and the remaining you use it for some others. So you split the holes, larger holes, into smaller one and allocate the one to other process, and remaining you can allocate to the other. And also I have told you, if two holes are close by, you merge them and make it as a bigger one. So these are the obvious one. Now the general question comes. Okay, when you have, just give you a analogy. Let me go over here. Where is it? Okay. So you have the system of processes here. I am drawing the holes now. There is one hole here. This is hole, not the process. I am just drawing the hole here. That means empty place. One process is here, one is here. Okay, a new process comes in. Remember, this is a hole now. Don't think it is a process. Empty place. Now I have to fit them among them. I assume that I can fit it. I can fit here, I can fit here, I can fit here. Remember, this is a whole empty place. This is, so I can fit either at this, either at this, either at this. Which one should I select? The question comes. Okay, there are many holes are there. Holes is nothing but an empty place where you can fit the process. A new process comes in. Now the question comes, where to fit it? So there are different algorithms are there that you can use to achieve it. The first one is the first fit. It's a very simplest algorithm. What is the first fit? Let's look at the story again. So what we have here is a memory location, and what I'm drawing is the whole, not the process. I'm drawing the whole. So we have many different holes scattered. Many may be there. I can spend the whole day drawing many holes over here, but that will not solve the problem. Now I have a process here. So what I'm going to do is I will check whether the process fits into this one. If the process fits into this one, I will immediately fill it. Okay, what do I mean by saying whether the process fits into that hole? If the size of the hole is it large enough to fit my process, you know very well, it definitely, if you look at the diagram itself, this up to here, it may occupy up to here, just to tell you that. Okay, it will definitely occupy within this hole. So whenever you find the one, if it is not fitting, go to the next one. Suppose if it is fitting, immediately put it there. If it is not fitting, go to the next one, check whether can you fit it in the second hole, can you fit it in the third hole, can you fit it in the fourth hole. Wherever you find the best, the first fit, not the best, wherever you find the first fit, you just put it there. So simple as that. Again, you can start from the beginning every time, or start from the place where you left. So last time you were here, then you can continue from here, or you can always start from the west. Okay, so what's the advantage of this is it's a very quick way of locating the space. What you have to do is you start from wherever you start, either from the beginning or from the last location. You just go and see whether the process can be fitted into a slot or a hole. If it is, just put it and your process is the work is over. The next option is the best fit. So what's the meaning of saying best fit is you go through all of them. So there are many holes are there. You go through all the holes. Okay, there may be many are there, and you have a process that is coming in. You check which one can be used. What is the meaning of best fit? Best fit means if the process occupies, suppose if the process occupies this and there is a waste, this much is wasted, is not, this is extra. If the process occupies only this much, it's a waste, remaining part is waste because it's a hole again. If the process exactly, roughly exactly fits here, okay, small variation will be there, so that's the best fit. You know what is the meaning of saying best fit? You fit it, it may be very loose. So when you go to buy a shirt or a pant, what do? You try to put it and see whether, okay, try. If it is very tight, you don't like it. Very loose, you don't like. But in between normal, you wear it. So that's the same idea. If it is fitting best, you use that. So what's the problem? You will have to search through all of them and then find the slot or find the hole. What is the advantage? There will be very small wastage or a leftover. Okay, that's what is called as a leftover. The next one is the worst fit, exactly opposite. What is exactly opposite? Exactly opposite means if again the same story will come. You have the memory here. You assume that these are all holes. These are holes. These are also holes. And you have a processor here, and you want to fit. So this will exactly fit in this one. That is the best fit. But what you do is, if I fit it here, lot of space will be there, empty. So in the worst fit, I take that one where I get more space. Now you may say, what is this? Why do you do that thing? Why do you want to go for a worst fit? The reason for doing worst fit is, remember, if it exactly fits here, let me give you this example, the best fit example. In the best fit, what will happen? It will fit here and a small amount of hole is available. In this small amount of a hole, you cannot load other process because it's too small to load any other process. What about here? You split it here. What is this one? It is a hole again. Remaining is a hole. I can easily incorporate one other process there. So if when you put it in the worst case, when you put it, a lot of space will be available. That can be used to put other process. But if it's a best fit, what will happen? You put it, a small hole will be there. In that, nothing can be filled in. So you are going to waste the memory. So that's why the worst fit is also an option there. Okay. Now the next problem is the fragmentation. So there are two types of fragmentations are there. One is the internal fragmentation. The other one is the external fragmentation. Okay. The internal fragmentation occurs in case of a fixed sized allocations. So right at the beginning I told you that there is something called as a fixed sized allocation. What is the meaning of saying fixed size allocation? The memory is, I'll draw it the other way around, the memory is partitioned into fixed sized. It is not, you cannot vary the size. Operating system says this is the size. If you want, you fit. If you don't want, don't fit it. So that is it. So you have fixed size. The size is decided by the operating system and you can't vary the size. Okay, if it is 1 KB means 1 KB, that's a fixed thing. In this case, what happens is if you put a process here, remember, because the size is full, you place a process. Okay, and if the process is occupying only this much of space, the remaining place will be a hole, and this hole cannot be used because the size is fixed. Got it? The size is fixed. Now you get these cardboards boxes. What happens is if you put a smaller item inside that, internally there will be some space. You cannot reduce it. If it is a bag, if your plastic bag or anything, you can tie it properly. Okay, whereas if it's a box, then the remaining space is a waste. You can't do anything out of it. So this space is internally inside the partition and it cannot be used here. So this is called as internal fragmentation. So internal fragmentation comes when you have a hole but inside the partition, but that cannot be used. Let's look at the external fragmentation. So external fragmentation comes, again I'm going to draw it the other way around, but you can draw it like this also or like this also. I am drawing it like this because I don't have space on that. So let's go to the other way around. Where is my mouse pointer? Okay, so I have this thing. Let me assume that you have a program. Okay, you have one other program. You have one other program. You have one other program. All are running now. There are many programs which are running. Many programs which are running. Many programs which are running, and so on. Many programs are running. Now after some time, what happened is this program completed. So when this program completes, what happens? You get a hole here because that program is over. Okay. This, not this one, this is over. After some time, this completed, this program, very small program, it completed, add two numbers, so this program completed. Okay, after some time this program is completed. So when I say this program is complete, what do I mean by saying that? There is a hole here, there is a hole here, there is a hole here. If you add all the holes them together, you get a very big chunk. If you add all of them, add this, add this, add this, you get a very big chunk in which you can incorporate a program. Other process can come. Now you cannot incorporate the other process. Why? Because this part is this is a very small part. This is also very small part. This is also very small part. Together, if you combine them, you get a very big whole. But now what is there is they are scattered in between the process. Remember, this is the boundary. Now in the previous case, what happened? the fragment was inside the partition. Now what is happening? The fragmentation is outside the partition. Okay, that is why they are called as external fragmentation. So I hope you get the difference. If the partition is there within the, if the hole is there within the partition, then we say it is internal. If there are two processes and the hole is there in between, then what we say, it is external fragmentation. Hope you get that the idea. So external fragmentations are you have small holes scattered across various places in the memory. If you combine all the holes together, you get a very big hole in which many processes can be fitted. But now you can't do anything because this hole is here. Suppose, let's say, suppose this program completes. Suppose this program completes, then you are going to get a very big hole here in which other process can be fitted. Now, as of now, because the holes are in between, stuck in between two running process, you can't use them. So this is called as a external fragmentation. So your dynamic allocations, the dynamic size variation can lead to the external fragmentation. Remember, external fragmentation can be severe. The worst case is, in case of external fragmentation, the worst case is you have one process, in between you have a hole, a tiny hole, then you have the other process, in between you have a tiny hole in which nothing can be fitted, again you have. So alternatively, in between every two process there is a hole, but that can be used. So that's the worst case. You are wasting like anything. So remember, when you have a hole, nothing can be done here. If it's a hole is very small, if you don't have a very small program, it is just a waste. And you don't want to waste the primary memory because it is already very small. It's a constrained resource. Okay. What is the solution for that? One of the solution is called as compaction. So what is the meaning of saying compaction is, in the compaction, again you can draw it like this and explain, like this and explain, but I will draw it the other way around because explanation remains same whether I say it in this way or that way. Okay, so let's assume that you have this situation. You have a process, then you have a tiny hole, you have a process, then you have a tiny hole, you have a process, and then you have a tiny hole. I can do that till the end of the day, but I won't do this. So now what you do is you try to shift. So if possible, remember, you try to shift the holes all together. So get them all the holes together, get all the process on the other side. So what do I mean by saying that? You try to get all the holes to the one side. So get all the holes, get the first hole, get the second hole, get the third hole, and get the processes on the other side. Okay, shift all of them to one side. That is called as compaction. Compaction is not always possible. Remember, if the address is generated at the compile time or at the load time, it can be done. If the addresses are bound at the runtime, that is execution time, then you can always do it. So if you have a relocation register and if you're trying to do it, it is possible. Okay. However, there is a cost associated with the compaction because you have to shift all of them, you have to shift all the relocation register. It's going to take a longer time, but it can be done. The other solution is, what we said is, one of the other solution is, what we said is, okay, this is the memory. A program starts from here and ends here. It's a continuous. So even though the small slot is given, the program starts and ends here. Next program starts and ends here. Next program starts and ends here. What do I mean by saying that? It is all programs are continuous. It starts from one place, it ends to the other place. Now what we are saying is the program need not be continuous. So what I mean to say that is, one part of the program is here, remaining part of the program will be here. So one is here, so you divide the program itself into smaller chunks called as pages and then place them in the memory. So you don't have the problem of holes or other. There are two ways in which you can achieve it. One is paging, we will see very next, and the other one is the segmentation that we are going to see afterwards. So that's all in this class. Thank you for your interest. We will meet again in the next class. Thank you.